Can you hear me? So the reference has been made a couple times during the presentation about either the FAA coming up with standards for flight hours, if you will, for drone pilots. I know private pilots, commercial pilots, there's a certain number of hours you have to have behind the yoke. Duke mentioned that you have training programs. What is the thought process at FAA for what's the number of hours of flight time is going to be required to get certified? And typically, what's Duke see as far as competency where people are comfortable with the drones?
So, on the first question on, I'll leave it to Jacob to answer the Duke side of it all, but he brought it up in his presentation. They're tending to use the manned model. We haven't built those bins yet for different certifications and defined the risk exactly. But just like manned, where you, as a private pilot, you don't need a lot of hours, but you can take up, actually as a student pilot, you can't take any passengers up at all. As a private pilot, you're limited in number, and you just increase those certifications that include hours, include different performance standards. That seems to be the way the FAA is moving out on almost everything that we're doing. They model it based off of their manned. It might not match exactly. I can't give you any numbers, but that's how I would say you can expect it to flow.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I would say, it could be that hours isn't the right metric. Right. I like a more of a proficiency standard. And so at Duke, training's really kind of broken down in a couple of different iterations. The first is an online self-paced ground school. So, you on your own, here's a tool to learn all the rules and regulations that you're going to need to pass the Part 107. I don't necessarily need to hold your hand for you to go through that. We've kind of played with, then do you go and take the test, or then do you come to the hands-on training? It's worked pretty well for us in the past to then roll them into the hands-on training, because then we can go over concepts that were covered in the online training that may be a little bit ambiguous for folks who don't have any experience in manned aviation. Decoding a METAR, we talked about the relevance of that for UAS, but we can say that for another time. But then through that hands-on training, really tailoring the training to what drone and what application are you going to go after. And so for our solar panel inspections, it's completely autonomous. So maybe not spending as much time doing stick and rudder as opposed to pre-programming the missions, because that's what you're going to be asked to do when you're out in the field. Not necessarily the case for something like that cooling tower inspection, which is all finger flying, stick and rudder, and zero autonomous. And so depending upon what your particular use case is for what type of drone and the complexity of that drone, it may be a 3-day training, it may be a 5-day training, it may be a 5-day training, and depending upon your level of competence, a couple days after that. But really just making sure that we all feel comfortable about releasing you to go and do that mission, unobserved by our team. So.
Actually, I have several questions. I'm Todd with Chevron. I'm quite amazed that the pull string could pull back the conductor without breaking through the woods.
So there was an interim step there. So we used 550 paracord. So that connected the first two spaces. And then that connected to a woven fiber referred to as mule tape. And that woven fiber is what ultimately pulls the conductor back. Okay. Which would be the same process if they walked through the woods. They'd take that mule tape from point A to point B. So you're really only adding that initial step with the paracord. So.
Okay, cool. So how did you get, like you were talking about your camera scanning images, how did you get your images off onto your network? Was it just a SD card or something? Or
yeah, so we have to get an exemption because we're not allowed to plug anything into the laptop. So again, that asking the questions, building relationships for us, that's been a long process with cybersecurity to get them comfortable to where we're at. But yes, taking the SD card off the drone, all the data stored locally on the drone, bringing it onto a laptop, in this instance, a very high-end laptop, to be able to post-process that data in a software such as Pix4D or Bentley to do some of that desktop inspection and reporting.
Okay, and then last question, are you tied in with ASSURE heavily?
We're not currently, but I think there's an opportunity coming out of this.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing for Chevron. Okay, thank you.
I don't know if this is cybersecurity or just security. I'm with Savannah River Nuclear Solutions, a DOE site, and I'm looking at drone technology for a project we have for material management. Perhaps we have a vendor that uses drones to stage products out in the laydown yard and use a drone at night to look for those products, so people know where to get them the next day. It's preventing work with government agencies on using drones in facilities like ours.
I risk getting ahead of the government here. So great application. We've heard that from construction on knowing where materials are and various other opportunities. But what I suspect is about to happen, at least in the federal, and it's already occurred with the FCC in cell towers, is I've been part of and asked to chop on legislation, part of the 2019 American Security Drone Act, which is going to restrict, if enacted, any federal procurement or flow through of dollars to contractors, subcontractors, uses of any Chinese product or parts thereof internal. So the Chinese, obviously DJI, so an American affiliate, but 85% of the marketplace right now is pretty much DJI product. So that's concerning for anybody in this space with federal dollars. It concerns the FAA and us at ASSURE because this doesn't restrict commercial application or private application, so it's still going to be 75% of what's flying around in the airspace. So while not directly answering your question, I think that needs to be laid out to everybody before you think, oh boy, I need to go out and buy, some drones to go do anything. If it's going to be involved in it near or around or include any federal dollars, although it's not been done yet, and the final legislation has not been written. Just beware of that as you make your decisions on what kind of products you're buying. It might be better to take your risk in buying financial risk and pay a little bit more right now for an American product. But there will be gaps. That's what we've been trying to identify, that in public safety and in some of the federal applications of these things, where is the real risk and the gap now that they've found great uses for these things, and now you're going to pull it out. Is there an alternate system that can fill those gaps?
We have any additional questions? Well, first, did Lux answer your question the way you were asked it? Was there some aspect that you didn't quite get to? It seemed like it was a more complicated question than that.
I think he kind of answered it. We've had some drone incidents, and so although there was never any really ruling that drones could not fly within our airspace, I think that was quickly remedied.
Yeah.
So
if it's now on the protected asset list, which I believe if it's a nuclear or DOE site, it almost surely is now. And what's been established for you for the drone operators, not that this can't be still violated, they are fences protecting your property.
Right.
But I think, it's a good moment just to kind of reiterate for non-government, such as our private nuclear facilities, there's a lot of confusion even internal to our company that airspace is protected when in fact it's not. Right. And so I think, educating, again, going out and learning, where your protections are, where your vulnerabilities are. We can go down a whole path of the counter UAS technology. But to kind of understand as that evolves, where you may want to invest in some of that technology is really important as well. So.
That really brings up another question that's always on my mind, and that's my personal airspace over my house. I found a drone flying outside my front door, and my first thought was go get my shotgun and shoot it down.
Yeah.
You know?
Don't do that.
Don't do it.
Don't do that. So by title, I'm trying to remember which title it is, but FAA Title 14, I think it is. It is an aircraft. That's why they're called unmanned aircraft systems, not aerial systems, because the FAA can't regulate aerials, but it can regulate aircraft. So where you go, and this is an education process, and it's come up in this disaster prep and recovery as part of our credential training and certification programs. It's necessary to help their local citizens. Instead of going out and writing new laws that are not actually going to be legal because it's the FAA's airspace, what we have are privacy issues, peeping Tom issues, all those things that are in local law already that the local law enforcement can enforce through those kind of methodologies. So infringement, public nuisance, all of those kind of things are already there, and just apply that, and it'll be much more successful than you shooting down the drone and getting yourself in trouble. That's a great idea, and what the difficulties, again, we're just starting to touch on this in that counter UAS application. The difficulty is, where is the individual that's flying that drone? Now, you can follow that drone and know where it lands and do that. That's totally legal. But currently, that law enforcement officer, soon in the future, we're going to, with the EID, we're going to have software on his cell phone that he as a law enforcement officer can put up and go, oh, that's registered aircraft such and such, and then go, and that, is it authorized? Yes, it is, to be up and flying, but it's doing something illegal. Send it back to his precinct, and then be able to draw all the data on who's the pilot, all that kind of stuff. But we are not currently allowed to listen even in on the radio frequency legally to define where that thing launched from. It's all part of FCC regulation, Title 18 law, to prevent people from eavesdropping on each other or even knowing communications are going. So privacy issues abound. We got to find the right compromise in policy, which we're not there, and we're really not super close to yet. But as a good suggestion would be to capture that, inform the police, and then just know in about 6 months to a year, when this UAS ID stuff comes out, that aircraft will probably have an electronic ID with it that law enforcement will be able to capture, like a license plate.
Great. Well, I think our time is just about up. I would certainly like to thank our exceedingly knowledgeable speakers in this disruptive and advancing technology with that still has a lot of headroom to grow. So this is a growth industry. Thank you.